We're still taking a look at one of the answers given for why humans are the only artists on Earth. We talked about Charles Darwin last time, and I know some of you might be thinking, what does Charles Darwin have to do with art? He wrote about Galapagos turtles, not Gauguin, and that's true. Although Darwin didn't write about art, he did write about where he thought it came from. In my last video, we talked about how Darwin said the pretty feathers of the peacocks give us the answers to the arts. He said sexual selection was the answer, and that art comes from mate preferences over time. Pretty feathers evolved because peahens liked them, and so he saw the appreciation of beauty in nature. So even though Darwin was not an art critic, he has had a huge impact on the arts since the late 19th century. His ideas have been built out and expanded to today. It's important to name his philosophy. Darwin's view of life is what we would call naturalism. It's a matter-only view of life. Only the physical exists. Only the physical accounts for what we see today. It's only matter in motion. There's no transcendent mind, no spiritual dimension, no supernatural events, no soul. So the mere fact that naturalists try to answer this question is interesting, because the creative ability in humans seems to be so much more than just a physical adaptation. But to get a fuller idea of naturalism's answers for why humans create art, let's take a look at the idea as it's carried forward into the early 20th century. There was a biologist named Ronald Fisher. In 1930, he published a book called The Genetical Theory of Natural Selection. And in a nutshell, he said that it wasn't only the pretty feathers that were passed on by evolution, but the appreciation of them as well. So the appreciation for beauty is inherited, just like a physical trait. His assumption is the same as Darwin's, that animals are making judgments about what is beautiful. As far as we know, no one has had conversations with animals regarding what their personal preferences are, so this assumption is built into the view. Darwin said the pretty feathers evolve over time because the peahens think they're beautiful. Fisher continues the idea by saying the preference for feathers has evolved over time too. And that brings us to today, where this idea is extended and applied to people. This field is called evolutionary aesthetics. It tells us that the artist is the equivalent to the peacock's tail. The artist is like a pretty feather that attracts more mates. So peahens think the male peacock is beautiful, humans think the artist is beautiful. And so the answer for why humans are the only artist on Earth is because creativity attracts mates. That is the only answer naturalism offers if it's consistent. And unfortunately, what follows from this view is that art has no real meaning, and there's actually no such thing as beauty as we think about it. A late 19th century philosopher named George Santayana published a book way back in 1896 called The Sense of Beauty. And in his book, he realized the logical outcome, that really naturalism says in the end there's no meaning. In his last chapter, in the conclusion of his book, he said, beauty, as we feel it, is something indescribable. What it is or what it means can never be said. Down at the end of this page it says, for matter and space and time and principles of reason and of evolution are ultimately brute, unaccountable data. So naturalism says in the end, all that art is brute, unaccountable data. For more detailed explanation of this theory, I recommend you go and watch the TED Talk entitled A Darwinian Theory of Beauty. One of the most ardent supporters of this view was the late philosopher Dennis Dutton. And if you watch the TED Talk, notice how, ironically, an artist illustrates the entire thing. Someone draws continually as he speaks on a whiteboard, and all of his ideas are explained with pictures to make it easier to understand, to add meaning to the words, and to add meaning to the ideas, which are in essence telling you that the art has no meaning. So it's up to you to decide if you think the naturalist answer makes sense for why humans are the only artists on earth. But we're going to start looking at art next time and turn our attention to some different questions. What does the work of an artist who is also a naturalist look like? Can we spot the work of someone who agrees with this worldview? We'll take a look at the work of American artist Ellsworth Kelly next time.